Thank you. So resuming council meeting for March 1st, 2022. I would like to have a motion, please, to accept for information the presentation from Accurate Assessment Group. Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion that we accept the presentation from property assessment from Accurate Assessment Group as information.
All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving forward, we're at 8.2. We have an RFD for the audit plan for the town of Rocky Mountain House.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That's actually Miss Quinlan's report.
Oh,
So,
sorry. So,
Miss Quinlan will provide that.
thank you very much, Miss Quinlan.
My apologies, I just saw the assessor off. So I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but this is just your 2021 audit plan. So when our auditor came last council meeting and met with everybody, this is something in the past I have brought, and especially with a new council, just so that they understand sort of the major areas or components of the audit. So I've kind of summarized the letter that he gave us. Now, you hadn't received a copy of it, so it is attached. But really the audit plan summarizes the major areas that I've outlined. So they touch on current developments in professions, CICA handbook, assert that they're independent, what their roles are as an auditor, what your responsibilities are as a council. And they outline the audit scope and the approach and, you know, the issues around if they find any illegal acts or fraud, which they will not, related party transactions, internal controls and sort of how they test those, their audit approach for risk-based approach, the overall audit strategy. Our materiality level for this year is 1.5 million. So they've actually increased it quite a bit. And I would say that's because they're able to place a lot more reliance on our internal controls and our accounting systems. They outline who their audit team is, the timing of the audit, their audit fees, and the communication of the results. So I just wanted to bring this back. I'm not going to walk through this because it's, yeah. But if you do have any questions, I mean, probably some of the biggest things is the council's responsibility, and I think he did ask this, but one of the things that as an auditor they're quite concerned with is if you know of any sort of what you think could be fraud or illegal acts or non-compliance, it's up to you as a council and or councilor to advise them that, you know, you think that. And then just going through, and he will come back and present the results, and you'll get your audited financial statements and the management letter. And I did go back and check last year's, and we actually had no comments at all. We had no items to work on. And in the past, there was quite a few pages of items. So we've really cleaned up the audit. Everything's in good shape. But I just wanted to make sure that you received a copy of this and understand sort of what the process of an audit is.
So I just wanted to rephrase or point out that the last audit of the financial statement had no comments on it whatsoever.
No.
Okay.
I pulled the letter. I mean, we can circulate it. I don't know if it probably did go to council. It would be in the minutes, but no, we didn't have any.
It was at the very beginning. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember.
We didn't have any audit or management points that we needed to work on. So, yeah.
So A+ then.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, sometimes you get small ones and I mean, it depends on, some of them are like, you need to look at this. And they could be very minor. If they get really big, then you have more cause for concern, but there's nothing that's.
Did anybody on council have any questions or comments about this information? So, Councillor Phillips?
Just that it's just refreshing that the process is so much smoother and much more reliable now. Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Dean. That's amazing.
Excellent. So I'd like to make a motion that the council accept for information the 2021 audit plan from Baker Tilly WCR LLP for the town of Rocky Mountain House as provided. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward. We're on 8.3, the RFD purchase of a new CPO vehicle. And then I believe we have. No, 8.3. Oh, the one that's printed off, did something change? Okay, seriously, look at that. It says, yeah, so sorry.
So is that a concern?
No,
We're 8.4 on here and then these printed copies.
so did we miss something? 8.1 was moving to closed session and that wasn't on my original sheet, so we're good to go. Because I got,
I'm doing it now.
you're doing it live. Well, thank you very much. Len's keeping me on my toes. Thank you, Len and Tina. Okay, Mr. Fraser,
Thank you.
RFD for, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship Council. Historically, when we purchase vehicles for a municipal fleet, the manufacturers give us a really wicked discount. We normally get about $9,000 off the purchase of a half ton. With COVID supply delays, this year, the demand for vehicles has outstripped the supply, and so none of them are offering this anymore. So we're asking for an additional $10,000 for the purchase of the CPO vehicle, basically to compensate for that.
Did anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Fraser? Councillor Alt.
5,000 of that's contingency, so it's really could just be a $5,000 increase.
Yeah, when we priced it out, we think 5,000 would bring it in, but it would be tight. I didn't want to have to come back to you in case the radios are over the pinstriping. To give you one example, our fencing supplier won't do quotes longer than a week now because his material costs are changing that rapidly. So yeah, we just wanted a little bit of a cushion in there.
Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, all you have to do is drive by the vehicle lots nowadays, and there's no vehicles, there's no supply. It's unfortunate that it's going to impact us, but it's a reality.
Can I ask Betty a question? Betty, do we have to, for this adjustment, do we have contingency in the budget, or do we have to go back to the budget and remove something in order to make this possible? Oh, yeah, Mr. Kraus can answer if that's more.
If you make a motion, then we amend the budget. So we've looked and we're funding this out of an MSI grant this year, and there's still funds available. So we'll just increase it. We don't have to take anything out.
Thank you very much. With that being said, if there's no further questions or comments, I'd like to make a motion, be it resolved that council increases the capital budget for the CPO vehicle by $10,000 from 6,500 to 65,000 to 75,000 with funding to come from the MSI grant. Any questions or comments on that motion? Okay, so all in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. So now if I have my numbers right, we're moving to 8.5, the pump track location.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. So I'm for you today just to provide a bit of an update with regard to the pump track project. Going back to 2021, members of the committee, approached the rec board about the pump track. We've had our discussions. In July, we were directed by council to work with the pump track group to find a suitable location for the project. And we've done those consultations. We've looked and met with the pump track group. The presentation that the pump track group presented to council at that time listed 4 potential locations: the Riverside Park, the Riverview Park, the Wild Rose Park, which was located behind the Wild Rose School Division, the West Central High School, and then the Centennial Park proposed location. Upon review of those locations, working with Mr. Swader from our planning department and looking at possible sites, we determined a 5th possible location would be the current dog park and the CNRL leased location. Now, that location combined is about 6,700 square meters. The site meets the topography requirements of what was suggested to us by one of the contractors that does this type of work that the pump track group was in touch with. That site is actually identified in the recreation master plan as the need for, or the proposed location for the pump track. It would require relocating the dog park, but that was also identified in the recreation plan for the need for a larger dog park. We haven't determined where that would go at this point. We'll do some further research on that potential location. The site includes, as I mentioned, the decommissioned CNRL lease site. We've determined in conversations with them that the site is due for decommissioning, and we would work with them to expedite that process prior to the beginning of construction of the pump track on that location. There is parking available both around the schools as well as the Helena Humney Park, the Lusopit Community Center. There's washroom access at that location with the Legion washrooms at the Helena Humney Park. And it does have exposure off of Highway 11, so people can see the activity that would happen in that location. Again, it's a great draw. I think there's space there to accommodate both a smaller kids track as well as a larger competitive track that the pump track group is proposing, as well as it could accommodate future expansion into the trees to the north along the existing trail for a potential future mountain bike skills park. So it checks a lot of boxes in that location. So after our discussions and going back and forth with the pump track group, this is the location we'd like to propose to council to move forward with. Unless council has any other specific questions.
Councillor Fraser. I know you mentioned it. I just wanted to bring it up again. I got a few emails already about the dog park when they saw a dog park location. So just that we're looking for a new location for the dog park.
Yes.
Somewhere else.
Yeah, and then so we've got a couple of other options we're looking at, but nothing's been determined. And certainly one of the things we're looking at is for larger space, because that's what was identified as a need, and that's been brought to us by the community
Yes.
previously, as well as looking for a larger space. So that's-
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Phillips had a question.
So I don't know how many comments I've heard about our current dog park, that it's just not up to snuff. So this would, address that issue at the same time as addressing a pump track issue. One thing I would like to see is with CNRL is to see if, with the decommissioning of that site, potentially the cost of building what we need to build there could come down, because CNRL might help out with that. I would think.
Yes, that certainly
That
will
would-
be part of the
yeah.
conversation as we work with CNRL is the opportunity for sponsorship or contributing to the project
Yeah.
as a good corporate citizen. And as they're removing their equipment and decommissioning the site is an opportunity to work with us as perhaps prepping the site as well.
I'm sorry, Tina. Counselor Hutchinson has a
Um,
question or comment.
So is there any concern with the sandy dump and traffic flow going through in the summer months, which we know is, I mean, there's times people are towards the highway trying to get into that location. And I would assume that this would be a busier facility on weekends. Is that something we should be looking at, or any ideas on how we keep the flow going?
I would anticipate, because it's beside the bike trail as already, that there is that existing flow of people riding bikes along the trail system there. But certainly as we design the pump track site itself, may lend itself for some potential additional parking along that spot. But I think when we looked at all of those factors, I don't anticipate there's going to be a huge concern with the additional traffic.
I'm just
that goes
thinking
through
with
it.
the kids over here and the washrooms over there, and let's cut across in between trailers dumping, and again, that's a limited time that we have trailers dumping, typically Sunday between 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock, but just
I think some of that could
question.
probably be addressed through signage and just, making the people that are coming to use the sandy dump station, watch for, bicycles and other people that are on the trail system as well.
So I agree with Counselor Hutchinson that I feel that, like, if it's a draw for the community, it should have a designated parking area for the actual park itself. And like relying on the school parking lot or the community center parking lot, which could be quite busy. That it's just a concern I have as well. That area, we want it to be busy. Like, we almost need an expansion of the sandy dump because of the increase of infrastructure or increase of usage in our beautiful West Country. And so, like, I just want to say I agree with Counselor Hutchinson that would be a concern of mine as well. And if you look at it, that's fantastic. I think that Counselor Boniface had a question, and then Mr. Kraus.
I would have to say that I also am concerned, trying to use the parking lot for the community center. Anybody who's ever attended a funeral at the community center during the summer, you very often cannot get into the service just simply because of the amount of recreation vehicles around that area. And, to ask a child from across that way to run over to a washroom here, kids are kids and they run out in front of vehicles, and I don't know if, I do not agree that signage will be enough to access flow and keep people moving safely. We had spoke actually about looking at other areas and other parks in our community that aren't being utilized to the full potential, such as the William Jessup and Lochern Park. Were these considered in this at all?
We did talk about the neighborhood parks, and one of the concerns around the neighborhood parks was parking as well. You're parking on the streets. And where I would see that is more if you're hosting competitions and those type of things. Majority of the users of this are going to be people on bikes who are riding through the facility as well, right? So we did take that into consideration, Councilor Boniface.
May I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also, there was an article in the paper about the possible amalgamation of Rocky E. coli School with Lochern School. If that was to happen, there would be land available where the old Rocky E is now. Would we be better off looking at a site like that where we have a lot of parking, and we could have we already have a huge area. I realize that would mean putting this off, but are these things we should be thinking about for future growth in our community?
Counselor Hutchinson, did you have a follow-up question before I get to Mr.
Yeah,
Kraus?
sorry. I was just, this map or the diagram that was done, this is recent with parking around the visitor center and whatnot. There's, like, I know they talked about adding more parking to the museum.
Counselor Hutchinson, what item number are you on?
That was the attached. This was
yeah.
directly out of the the
Page.
recreation master plan,
Yeah,
that does show parking that never came to be, but it does potentially show space there for parking.
Which-
And
which
this was
would-
developed in 2017, this diagram. It identifies the pump track there, but it
yes.
also develop, identifies other possibilities of how that whole site could be developed.
Thanks.
Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, thank you, your worship. And actually, yeah, and really all I want to say is Councillor Hutchison is absolutely right. All those items need to be addressed. But to address it, we need a location. Yeah, there would have to be parking for the pump track. I mean, because not everyone's just going to ride there, right? So, but that would all have to be addressed through the concept plan and plus the flow of traffic and so forth. So it would be addressed.
I know that there's, I have a comment. I really want to move forward with the pump jack, but I kind of think that, if we could take some more time, there's some other projects being proposed to council that might be a suitable combination of this project. And I would sure like to have more time to consider rather than, like jumping forward with, like things that are going on. Like there's other development area in Rocky that would have space and things like that. And I'm just wondering, I know we're anxious to get started on it, but the longer we can take time to prepare, if you feel comfortable with that, could we carry this over? Like, this isn't something like, it's not like the rec center name where you need to start doing brochures next week. I mean, we can still start like working on plans and considering things. Now we have a little bit more time to figure out if we do the dog park. I'd certainly like to have some dog park solutions before we like determine that that's the site, like some options so that concerned citizens that have been using that, space could say, okay, yeah, this is what this is going to be, but then our area is there. Have we looked, because we're trying to decide on it, but it would be a lot easier if we had options to that. Have we looked at any other option areas for a dog park in like on combination with this site?
We have internally looked at those things and I prepared at this time to bring those forward. I think we need to do a little bit more research on the couple. There's, again, identified in the recreation master plan, there's several sites that were identified in there, north end of town, south end of town, the Creekside area, but I think we need to flesh out some more detail on that. I think in proposing this site currently, again, as we discussed with the pump track group, they're anxious to start the promotion and fundraising, but without a confirmed site, it's hard for them to work with the potential designer to come up with a concept plan and deal with some of the other concerns that may have with regard to parking and other types of
Yeah.
things.
Also this, like your recommended land, like I like that you have a recommended piece of property, but like your recommendation there, it's also along Highway 11, which could actually turn into like highway commercial. And depending on what happens with our highway, which we're still hopefully waiting to hear about from our government, it wasn't in this budget yet, for the expansion to the other side. But I mean, that would be a good highway commercial piece of land as opposed to a park. If we're trying to draw people into our community so that like the purpose of that would be, economic reasons, correct? Like they would want to visit shops, then, putting it there with limited parking, we've got the spray park, the community center, the museum, the rec, the football field, all that sort of is kind of tight there. Maybe something downtown, like they're, like not necessarily downtown, but if we want to draw them in for economic reasons, or if we want it just for our community members, then does it have to be right against the highway? That's just another, concern I have for that. Councillor Phillips.
So, looking at these 5 options, I mean, this has the best parking options. Yes, there's going to be concerns with bicycle traffic and RVs and such, but again, those are things that we have to address in a plan. But this site would allow us to have competitions come to town. I don't see any of these other sites that would allow us to have any competitions in town because there's no parking in any of these other sites. And as far as being a highway commercial, I understand that's on the highway, but in order to create an access road to that, we would have to somehow create a road into that area right now that doesn't exist and would have to, I don't even know how we would get an access road into that. For the type of traffic that you would need for a highway commercial lot. I honestly don't see that as feasible just because of the way it is, and you're not going to get an approach road going onto the highway from there. It would have to come in from behind. So I really don't see that becoming a highway commercial piece of land just simply because of the way the access road would have to come in. And Mayor Beach, what projects are you saying that we should join up with? I'm not aware of any projects that are on the.
So they are confidential ones right now that I mentioned before we did the budget talk that the chamber presented to me and Mr. Schwader and.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and that's very conceptual at this point.
Correct.
Whereas, we have something that's concrete and wants to move forward. I know the one you're talking about now,
Okay.
that may be years down the road.
Right.
It's hard to say. It may be years down the road, whereas
Right.
this fundraising needs to have a site and we need to have a plan to be able
Yeah.
to fundraise.
I have a difference of opinion. I think they can do fundraising without having a site locked down. I also think that we could talk to the county if they're in favor. Maybe they have a piece of land that would be, it doesn't necessarily have to be right in town limits. Maybe it could be a piece of land that the county has that would be, everything we need if we're talking about things like that, that would be adjacent or suitable. Counselor, I'm sorry, Counselor Hutchinson.
I agree with a lot that Councillor Phillips has to say there. I can't in any way possible see this becoming shovel-ready land, especially with the lease on there. And there could be complications because of that and the road access. I don't think there's a whole lot that we can do with that land, given what our plan has been around it, but to make it some type of a recreation type area. So I'll make a motion if I can find my page that has it. So I would be it resolved that council approve the dog park location, including the CNRL lease site as the location of the pump track park.
So I have a comment before we vote on that, and I'd like a recorded vote. I would like to renew my concerns for moving forward with this track at this time until we have a little bit more information. And I would like to see some of the projects we already have, like we're working on the matrix, and we have a lot of other recreation that we're putting money in and funds into. I'd like to see that resolved before we finalize a location. Is there any other comments?
Sorry, just clarification, which projects are you talking? I'm not sure what projects you're talking about. You're saying we have projects in the matrix, and I'm not sure what projects you're discussing.
Well, this would be part of recreation, right?
Yes.
So it would be part of the recreation budget for upkeep and maintenance, and it's also part of capital, right?
Mhm.
So we have a lot of things going on in our recreation matrix right now. We're waiting for the report back on which items we're going to do in our community. Is that correct?
Yes, again, obviously we had this discussion during budget discussions. And so we're moving forward, beyond what was determined in budget. We've got funds set aside for the design and concept, and that's why I brought this forward. By approving a location at this point, we can go forward. The other projects, they'll be dealt with as they come across and are reviewed by rec board and we'll deal with them on that scoring matrix, but this project has been identified and has been discussed at budget. So again, it's at council's discretion as to whether or not we want to move forward and approve this location at this time.
Thank you very much. So is there any other further questions? Do you have another question, Councillor Hutchinson?
No.
Okay, so going back to Councillor Hutchinson's motion, all in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to 8.6, change my paper. RFD amendment to the bylaw. Good afternoon. It's very nice to see you. Oh, sorry. Hmm. It's just so we have Miss Renee Hartling, Mrs. Renee Hartling here this afternoon to talk about the land amendment bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We are bringing forward a proposed change to the land use bylaw. Basically, the change is to make some amendments to some of the uses on some of the districts. So future development, the Parks District, and to make some clarifications as well. So under the, what I'd like to do is just go through the report, and Michael Fitzsimmons, if you haven't met him, he's our development officer with planning. He's going to assist, and we can talk about some of the changes. I've provided the legislation with the change to the land use bylaw. We are required to do an advertisement as to the changes and to have a public hearing as well, should council proceed with first reading today. We are proposing in the report that should council approve first reading, that we would hold a public hearing on March 22nd, which would allow us the 2 weeks advertising that is required under the Municipal Government Act. There is no impact to the 2022 budget with the proposed changes, and there is no impact to staff as well. We're going to pull up each individual excerpt as I go through the report. So Michael, if you could pull up excerpt 2A. And if you could go back to the actual document and pull up 2A. So the way that I've set this up is we're going from the earliest pages in the land use bylaw, and then we'll go through to kind of the documents towards the end of the land use bylaw. We could have attached the whole thing, but then you would have like probably 1,000 pages under the report. So under excerpt 2A, that's the reference is section 3.2, accessory buildings and uses. What we did was we amended some of the references in here. You'll see under 3.2.2.2 or 3, notwithstanding subsections, there's a reference there, and those references were an error that was done at that time. So it's just correcting those references. What it relates to is basically the side yard setback, side and rear yard setback. For example, a duplex might have a detached garage that shares a common boundary, and this is the reference that would allow for that. So, as well, under a manufactured home is a discretionary use in all residential districts. Go back. The clause refers to, again, the 1 meter. Typically, it's a 1 meter setback for side and rear. And these other references that we've corrected would allow for that to not occur, right? And then if you pull up the next excerpt. In the next excerpt, which is 2B, that's section 3.27, general regulations for manufactured homes. We've made some suggested amendments here that are more consistent with practices. So under section 3.271, we've isolated this statement into one statement. So we've taken out the "and shall have," and then we've created that section 3.27.2 so that all of those exceptions are listed there. The reason that we've done that is we wanted to make it clear that for manufactured homes in other districts, other than a manufactured home district or a future development district, that it has to do more with the character of the neighborhood. So if a manufactured home was moved into, say, an RL zoning, which is a discretionary use, a manufactured home is a discretionary use, it would comply more. It would have the peaked roof, it would have the permanent foundation, and it would kind of meet the character of those neighborhoods more so. So this could include like a modular home that was brought in and put on a permanent foundation, right? Because a modular home would fall under the definition of a manufactured home.
I
Go
did
ahead,
have a
Your Worship.
question about,
Yeah.
that was my question, is the wording manufactured home? Because when you do a search on that, it differentiates. A manufactured home has the I-beams
Mhm.
on the foundation,
That's right.
and the modular home it doesn't go with the HUD codes, it goes with local building codes. And I'm just curious if you think modular home should be added to manufactured home and modular home, because they're not exactly the same.
They're not, no, but under our definition, we felt our definition was broad enough to allow for modular homes to be incorporated, because it talks more about them being built off site.
Right.
Constructed in a separate building and
Right.
then moved on site,
But
right?
it's,
So,
yeah, but usually it doesn't address like the HUD versus the local building codes
Mhm.
in the
in
definition.
the
So is that,
definition, yeah.
should the definition then say modular, like a manufactured home could also include a modular home?
Yeah.
Would that be a change that we should add in there? Because they use different building codes and, like.
Yeah, so what we could do is, because there's other changes that we've, so this is something that we wanted to get addressed right away, because there's some applications that are hoping
Pending.
to get in.
Yeah.
So we wanted to bring this to council, but we do have a binder where we've got some suggested changes to the land use bylaw, and we want to go through it in more detail and bring it back this fall.
Okay.
And that could be one of the things that we could definitely add, is like potentially adding a second definition for modular home
Right.
to that, and then going back at that time again. And then we would have to look at where those listed uses could go, like as a discretionary use.
Okay,
Right.
and then, so my second question on the same thing then, on number 5, where it says the width of 20 feet, you're just trying to keep a double wide in those areas that aren't strictly manufactured homes, because they're a little more conducive to like a whatever RL neighborhood,
Yes.
rather than, because they can come in like 14, 16, 18 foot wide and bigger.
Right.
But you're saying that in this specific land use area, it has to be a minimum of 20 feet.
Yes, because that's over the 6 meters. So it would be like, that would account for, say, a double wide or a modular, right?
Right, but just like, yeah, but you're just limiting mobile homes for that area that have to be bigger. They have to be a double wide or bigger for those areas, but not other areas.
That's right.
Is
So-
that gonna affect the application that we have going on, or the application is in a weird area?
No, because that's a future development district,
Okay.
right? So, yeah, because you're talking more about like the modular homes. So
Well, no, I'm
this-
talking more like, I'm
Yeah.
talking about like,
Yeah, because under the
Yeah.
regulations where it's talking about the minimum width,
yeah,
that would be more for like an RL or a medium density district or
Okay.
that kind of thing, where it's.
yeah,
more-
it's just like some
That's right.
people have, you're just limiting those areas that you have to have a double wide or bigger
That's right.
home in that area.
Yes,
It doesn't affect any of the other areas, right?
not the manufactured home district, it
Yeah.
wouldn't affect, and then it wouldn't affect the future
development.
development district
Okay,
as well.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
That was
very
my-
welcome. Okay.
I'm like reading my note. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I've added a note as well, like to kind of research the
modular.
modular.
Yeah,
a
because I
little
think
bit
that's
for,
like a
the
trend.
fall. Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Okay, and then back to this 2B. Again, so just clarifying, and I think, just our discussion probably provided some of the details as to why we wanted to set those regulations outside of those districts. And then in excerpt 2C, section 9.1, the public district, we've added religious assembly as a discretionary use because we currently have religious assembly in those districts. This would allow for a religious assembly to do, for example, an addition to their church. So again, accounting for some uses that are there existing and allowing us to kind of add this use as a discretionary use for the purpose of not only existing but future development. In excerpt 9.3 future development district. So we've added several uses to this district. One is agriculture general, manufactured home, religious assembly, and secondary manufactured home for parcels like that would be only for parcels over 80 acres. So what that does is it allows some of the larger parcels that have current secondary manufactured home, it would allow for them to bring in another secondary dwelling, a secondary manufactured home. On the future development districts, we want to ensure that we aren't approving something more permanent in those locations because a developer could come in, purchase that parcel, and then start developing. So that was the reason where we added another section at the bottom with regards to the non-permanent foundation.
So then I think that's again where you have to change your manufactured home because modular homes have to have a foundation.
That's right. Yeah.
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 So it's,
Yes.
yeah.
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 Yeah. A modular home typically goes on a more
Footing or a
permanent
basement,
foundation.
yeah.
Yeah. Where a manufactured home is on a chassis.
Yeah.
Or
or beams or.
yeah, and a lot of, one of the things with the previous definition is that it required a permanent foundation for all of them, but some of the manufactured home parks don't require a permanent foundation, so it was kind of contrary to practice. So, and then, so again, just that last clause that we added to clarify that, for though if in that district, it would have to be a non-permanent foundation. In excerpt 2E, that's the use definition. So 14.3, the definition of agriculture general was amended, removing the breeding and raising of livestock. So it's consistent with our town livestock bylaw. Under the town livestock bylaw, breeding and raising of livestock is not allowed. So we wanted to ensure that it was consistent. In excerpt 2F, which is the use definition, we added a definition for secondary manufactured home for the parcels over 80 acres because we needed a definition to accompany the use that we've listed. And then in excerpt 2G, section 16, schedule B, groups of uses, we've just added secondary manufactured home as a subordinate group because you have to have a primary manufactured home on the parcel before you can have a secondary. So,
do we have any land where they're grazing livestock on it now in our ag zone that's going to cause an issue when we take that out? Or you think it's already covered in the other?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Mr. Schwader. No. Yeah.
I just thought I would ask the
Yes.
question.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. That'll be easy then.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Does council have any further questions for me? Okay. I have put in a recommended alternative that includes a motion for the date of the public hearing for March 22nd. And I just wanted to confirm if that date will work for council if they go through with the
Are we
first
going,
reading.
Lucky? So we have a council meeting that day. And then we have a tentative Wild Rose School division from 5 till 7 on that specific day, the
Yep, so
22nd.
typically a public hearing it takes place like at the beginning of the council
During the
meeting.
meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's during the meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Just
you're
wanted
welcome.
to clarify
Okay, no worries.
my little. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, so I'd like to, Counselor Fraser.
I can make that motion. I
Thank
can
you.
Say, be it resolved that council give first reading to amending bylaw 2022-02, a bylaw to amend land use bylaw 2020/19, and set the public hearing date for March 22nd, 2022 at 1 PM in town council chambers.
Any questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you, your worship and council. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Correspondence for action. Am I in the right place now? Just a sec. Two times today. That's fantastic.
Yes, good afternoon again. Yeah, I guess well, I guess the letter came to you, Mayor Bache, about the possibility or the invitation from the Minister of Culture to perhaps for Rocky Mountain House to consider submitting a bid for the 2004 Alberta Winter or Summer Games. Haven't had a lot of opportunity to review this. Certainly hasn't been a discussion at the Recreation Board level. I know at this point we're on their agenda for tomorrow is talking about the 55+ games. Looking at the timelines and deadlines for submitting a request for or an expression of interest in the next couple of weeks. Pretty hard to get that done and then to have an actual bid prepared for April. I would say, yeah, it's probably not something that I would recommend at this point. We've looking forward. The Alberta, Winter Games, Summer Games, very, very large competitions. I'm not sure if we would have community partners or other communities close enough that would be able to offer all of the types of events. I know there's certain events that we don't have the facilities to provide at this point. But they like to say, well, we'll give you some money, but at this point, I think there's a lot of other options for us. So unless you have any other specific questions that I might be able to try to answer. But.
Yeah,
I don't have questions, but
Counselor Hutchinson.
Dave, Len, and myself can all agree that to try and pull something like this together with that time frame is non-existent. There's a difference between this and the 55 games. These are typically youth and the number of events are huge. We would require sleeping related, like dorm type facilities for them to be sleeping into. We're required to feed meals, pack lunches. It's a huge undertaking. And maybe we want to look at something like this in 6 years. But in a longer time frame, whereas with the other games that we're actually talking about at the rec board meeting, structure set up a lot differently, insurance, things like that are all done in a different way, and they're seniors, pardon me, over 55. That would put me in that category, so I'm not going to say seniors. So yeah, I think we should just accept this for information.
Does anyone
Thanks.
else have any
Thanks
comments
for
on that?
for clarifying that 55 age comment. I fall into that category too. Yeah, I agree. I think, as much as this would be a great thing, I think it's overreaching right now. I think we should focus on something that we can attain and have a chance at getting. So I just think that's where resources should go.
Counselor Hutchinson, would you like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion to accept this for information only.
Should we reply and say we're not interested, or we don't need to request? Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. All in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Thank you so much. Correspondence for information. Are there any questions or comments on any of those items listed there? So can we have a motion to accept those items? Counselor Ald,
I'll make a motion. We accept 10.1 to 10.6 of the information.
all in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 11.1, Mayor's Report, still in my computer, so I will present next month. Counselor Ald, did you want to highlight anything from your report?
No.
Counselor Boniface, did you want to report anything from your report? Counselor Capuro, did you have anything you wanted to report?
Oh, thank you.
Counselor Frazier, did you have anything you wanted to report?
No, you were all at everything, so.
Counselor Hutchinson, did you want to comment on any of your?
I just wanted to say the Brownlee Emerging Trends in Municipal Law I took. I don't know who else did as well, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and really? Okay. I that was my first initial reaction, 7 hours. And like I said, I sat and I thought it was great. So that's just mine. And also the EO-EP Municipal Corporate Planning and Finance. That one I've done 2. I have one more tomorrow and one more next Wednesday, and another one that I just find invaluable information that I wish I knew some of these things. Not before I got elected, but definitely in the first couple months, because just to the amount that's been learned and makes me realize that, gee, I'm kind of getting it. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Counselor Phillips.
The only one thing in particular, I attended the Parkland Regional Library Focus Group, and that was basically a focus group to have Parkland Regional Library System, project what they're going to do for the next, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, of which the Rocky Library is part of the Parkland Regional Library System. So it was quite interesting being part of that group and just seeing the ideas and the suggestions that were put out there for the future of libraries.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? So could we have a motion to accept for information 11.1 and 11.2?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Action list. Getting into the right place here. For March 1st, 2022, Mr. Kraus.
Unless council has any questions, I think administration's on top of our actions.
Perfect. So if there's no, Counselor
I
Phillips.
just had just a question on the new recreational center logos. Do we have a time frame on that yet, or is that still in production?
So the first step was for actually me asking the county for permission. That has gone off to the county. I haven't received a reply yet. So that's where we're sitting right now.
There's no other questions or comments? Excuse me. So can we have a motion, please? Counselor Frazier.
I will move that we accept the action list as presented.
Thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried. Do we have any administrative inquiries? Do we have any notices of motion? So I'd like to have a recess for 10 minutes and then move into closed session. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah, okay, excellent. So we'll have a 10-minute recess and then we'll move into closed session